June, do you want
Hi,
to
everybody.
keep the meeting?
Sure. Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our collaborative Zoom meeting on March 1st, 2022. Just to remind people that this is being recorded. And I hope you've had a chance to take a look at the agenda. There's a slight change. We're just flipping number 5 and number 6 on the original agenda, so that the presentation by Nicholas Zuba on effective policy communications is now number 5 on the agenda, followed by the CPACE review that Nicholas will also be leading us on after that. So why don't we go ahead and do the minutes. Were there any questions or proposed edits to the minutes? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mark, you moved earlier.
Anybody to
I
approve?
make
the
a motion to move, and Mitch, you can second it.
Second.
Yeah.
Thank
Great.
you.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and note that the minutes are approved then. Okay. So we'll go ahead with ours. I'm sorry for the slight delay. We've got a packed agenda as usual, and we're gonna go ahead and go through this. And so the next thing on our agenda is an update on the meeting that June and I had with Town Supervisor Jane Elkanini and Town Administrator Meredith Robson. So June, would you like to give the update on that to start off with?
Sure. So it was a wonderful session where the 4 of us met, and Sue joined as well. Basically, the great news is Jane and Meredith were very sincere in expressing their appreciation. They really value the hard work and commitment that all of the collaborative members and volunteers show. They expressed that they consider this very important to the town. So they really show it as a priority. And Jane also expressed that she sees changes in many roles, including Robin's, as well as the transition with leadership at the collaborative, but she sees it as a fresh start. She wants us to take a new, clear-minded approach to working cooperatively with us in a very positive and very productive manner. She looks forward to lots of ongoing communications. We'll be keeping Meredith in the loop on virtually everything because, Meredith operationalizes just about everything. So Jane indicated, they're still getting settled into their new roles, and things may take a little longer as they work through some organizational details. But Karen and I both felt that the tone of the meeting was so positive, so constructive, so interactive, and that was in many ways our most important priority for that meeting. We felt that starting off on a really interactive, positive note was what we needed to do well this year in accomplishing our objectives. And we both felt that Jane and Meredith expressed that with conviction and sincerity. So that was a wonderful start. We also heard from Jane that with regard to development of the collaborative's proposals, they would like to be involved earlier in the process. They want to take a step-by-step approach, really ensure that we are aligned going forward. So that ideally they'd like recommendations and ideas to be presented to her and to Meredith, but to be presented to the town in almost a draft conceptual stage, along with very clear, concise, almost bulleted statement of objectives. So they don't want us necessarily coming back with finished reports, finished product, and then turning it in, but rather let's be kind of in lockstep. Let's progress together. Let's discuss it as it goes along. And that made a lot of sense to us. They want to avoid any waste or loss of valuable time on everybody's behalf. We know, and she acknowledged that the collaborative and certain committees of the collaborative has spent a tremendous amount of time on their work and on proposals. And she really hopes to avoid any loss of time. One of the opportunities of getting into the discussion phase earlier on is there are some other factors that we need to consider, such as input from legal counsel, or resource or capacity issues. So we want to address those as we go along. Does that make sense to everybody?
Hi, this is Alan Ryder. I was kind of thinking along the same way in the way that people lobby Congress, which is that there's a process that goes on and an exchange of ideas.
Yes.
So that before you go to a meeting and present something, everything has been talked through.
Yes.
And so issues don't come up for the first time that in this case would make members of the Board of Trustees uncomfortable, because if they do, we already know it. And so we can tailor what we're going to do in advance of attending a formal meeting and making a presentation. And it's a more collaborative effort.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
also there's a feeling of sort of ownership or buy-in earlier on in the process. You know, it's it becomes part of their thinking when they have a more kind of formative hand in it. So
I agree. And it's the same way, like if you present it, then you're done. And there's no further communication between you and the Board of Trustees. And if you do it in advance, then there is the opportunity to do that and to allay concerns and address concerns and maybe modify what we're requesting in order to ensure passage in the best way that we would like to get everything that we want, which may or may not be everything that we want, but at least at least you have a good chance of meeting the concerns of our elected officials.
exactly. Yes. We sensed that going into the year. And one of our primary goals this year was to build trust. And this is a great starting point. So thanks for reading.
And to be fair, though, we have had someone who's been a member of the board at every collaborative meeting in order that there is some vision of the board and communication of what might be going on with the board in the collaborative. I think the directions have been for the pieces that the collaborative puts together to be fairly well researched or be sent back to the collaborative for more research before the board would hear it. And so there's been this mysticism about what some of the members of the board, what they feel, right? I mean, certainly we had this conversation with George about the leaf blowers last week. Like, what are they thinking? Everything takes more than one meeting, and everything takes more than one meeting to have it finished. But if we sit around the table, I mean, we've talked about this early on, and I think the decision was made to break it up into sections. And I must say, a whole lot of work went in the last month in order to meet what the directions were.
Well, that's where I go back to
this.
Jane suggested we take a fresh start here. So it's going to be different than it was before. And we're all, I think, aligned with the agreement that nobody's time should be wasted, and we want to be very productive. So we're taking a different approach this year. What our experiences were in the past, we're going to learn from and work to.
So what do we do with the work that was put in the last 2 months on the sections of the emergency plan, and whether those are, I mean, initially, that was just a list of ideas that could have walked by Jane without there were meetings, there was writing time, there was really quite a lot of work that went into that. Are we saying all that work is just?
So we appreciate all the work that was put in, right?
I think, in fact, Karen, this is actually a perfect bridge, what Michelle's mentioned, to get us to sort of where we stand on phase 2 and all the work that was put in on the climate emergency response. Because essentially, yes, phase 1 of our project was, what are the ideas that we feel are strongest? And then we prioritized them. And then phase 2 was about doing that research, Michelle, that you're referring to, and the writing and identifying what questions still need to be asked to fully inform those proposals and those priorities. And for the past month, meetings and research were done. Really, it was a stellar effort on everybody's part. We really do have most of the information we need now, as well as the question lists that Karen and I are consolidating and organizing to address. But here's something that is I want to remind on one point and set some expectations going forward. You know, we said all along that we were going to identify our priorities. And when we looked last month, when we looked at the 10 or 11 priorities that the 3 teams came up with, that was quality of life, sustainability, and resilience, we said from the get-go that we were not expecting Jane and Meredith and the board to plow ahead with 10 or 11 recommendations, but we were going to explore them considering the timelines that we all ranked these priorities by. What resource requirements? Is it near term, 1 to 2 year kind of implementation? Is it midterm, 3 to 5 years? Is it long term, 5 years plus? So we never expected to go ahead with 10 or 11 recommendations. We knew we needed to qualify those further and then support them with more of a how-to. How do we go about making those things happen? So we are breaking those down into smaller bits. There was no effort was wasted. Each, as we unroll, as we roll these out and get buy-in and input from our town head leads, we are going to decide together where those fit. I don't know that anybody can say right now what the top priorities of our board and our town leadership are with regard to those priorities. We know what we believe are most urgent, but this is going to be a more iterative process.
Did you discuss the list of items that you had to know what their take was on them and which ones will pursue and which ones will wait?
Karen,
So
you,
I think, yeah. Well, what we quickly sensed from the meeting from Jane was that the purpose of the meeting for our first meeting with them was really she wanted to clarify what the process, what she thinks a productive process would be in terms of a relationship. She wanted to talk about, how we could create trust and what process would make sense in terms of our relationship, right? The collaborative town relationship. And so that we focused really on process in this first meeting. And to that end, she also, suggested that in terms of communication, Jane would like communications with town staff to be centralized through June and I, right? In the past, we've been going through to some of the town staff, and that has caused some confusion. And so now that we've got a new town supervisor and relatively new town administrator, they feel that it would be more productive if everything goes through June and I, and that we also communicate directly with Jane, Meredith, and we copy Robin and Sue on it too. So that was one of the things that they wanted to suggest as how we go forward, that we do centralize our communications.
So in effect, you're taking on what the role of Steve Altieri was as the administrator with Nancy, because Steve knew all the departments.
I think we're taking
Right?
Steve,
I mean, go ahead. We'll just.
I think
So Meredith,
it's about efficiencies to start with. Town staff, we know where conversations have taken place, but they don't report to us, and some of the staff don't know us well, and there's more clarity. And also, why not address questions through your management? If somebody reports to Meredith, then that's a more effective way it may be at times a more effective way to communicate.
How often are they committing to meeting with you? Because if things need to be, centralized, and they really want things in draft form rather than a finished form, that makes an assumption that you'll probably get their time on a somewhat frequent basis. Is that true or not?
We didn't set up specific schedule of meetings. Jane, Karen, would you agree that Jane was very open? She didn't set limits, but she did ask that we be very brief, concise, get some main ideas out.
that's right. And I think we have to make it digestible for them. Right. We don't want to, it's a few points at a time.
Yep.
So that they're not going to feel, it's not going to be too much to digest at once. Right. So that's what we have to bear in mind. That's why she said step by step. And
this is very different than what was done before. We're not taking a 50-page. So, even when we talk about what's next on, phase 2, where do we go from here? We originally thought we were going to follow the original plan that was discussed at the end of last year and last fall of doing this upfront identification of priorities and doing some due diligence around that, and then having a draft to go forward with. We don't see it as a written draft at the moment. We see it as a series of discussions. So
I just want to say a couple of things. So I guess I think we're probably all behind the idea of a reset. If Jane wants to do these things in a more comfortable way for herself, fine. And of course, we want to work with her. But the town, we all know that the town works slowly.
Yep.
And if Jane is saying she's not going to be a bottleneck to this, she's going to allow you guys to, promote our ideas, and she's going to be engaged, then fine. I guess we'll all, be comfortable taking a step back and allowing your process to work itself out. That makes sense to me. But I mean, how much time will go by before we feel compelled to say, where's the results? What's Jane actually engaging with us on? There's
Said two very important words, Kevin. One was reset. So let's really think about this as a reset. We have to put some, previous expectations aside. And also you talked about bottleneck. Now, for better or worse, the word bottleneck didn't come into the conversation. Jane did not promise not to be a bottleneck, but we are going to adjust our expectations, no doubt. But one of the benefits of the great team we have, and Karen and I working together, I'm going to turn this over now, but just to say is we are filtering and we're looking at things in a different light. We are not looking at necessarily big accomplishments happening in short term. We are looking at smaller pieces. Some things can get accomplished in a near term. Some things take longer to roll out. A lot of the initiatives, a lot of the serious things that we're concerned about are multi-layered and multi-dimensional. Trees, for example, there's so much to that. It's not one action, it's a series of actions and a series of decisions. And we also expect to make it easier to say yes, to agree, to find things that are palatable and digestible so that we get into a habit of putting forward ideas that can be managed and agreed to. I'm going to
Yeah. Go, Judy.
Jim, one quick thing. I'd strongly recommend inviting, as I did back in August, the administrator to one of our meetings. She doesn't have to stay the whole time, but she should at least have the opportunity to address us.
Absolutely.
Whatever she wants to say.
We know that there's a lot of
same thing with the supervisor.
Yeah.
She'll be she's been with us since August, and we're approaching April. Pretty soon she'll be here 1 year, and she has not shown up.
We're trying to see both sides of this. I think Nicholas is going to be talking later about this, but that's our perspective. Yeah. She sees it a slightly different way, but both Jane and Meredith expressed true commitment to working together in this process. We don't have reason to doubt them, but we do understand that things may move more slowly than we'd like, but we know that there are some things that have been sitting and there's been no movement, and we're all on all sides looking forward to progress.
June, can I jump in and just say quickly that this sounds good. One theme that I think I have really benefited from attending the VOL environmental meetings, the LEC, and also now the VOM environmental meetings. And I think that it's very interesting to see how they've learned to structure their process. I really, truly mean instructive. And I know that Karen and you have done that. Maybe others could do it because it's helpful to learn from each other. One thing that's a little bit different is that sometimes the environmental groups can have like 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 or 3 ideas that we're going to try to drive forward and even bring to the board, because how is it really ever possible to do more than that substantively in a year? I mean, per year, right? And we've talked about this before. So I just wanted to throw that in there. What part of it is also not letting it doesn't have to be them picking and choosing. It could be our group picking and choosing and then presenting to them so that we can see where we can get buy-in and then have the dialogue that you've been discussing, and get to yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And also just, they did want to say that, Jane and Meredith wanted to say that they are considering that the tree code, there've been some organizational, issues, I guess, in terms of sickness and things like that. And, but I guess it's also an example where they would have liked a more, step-by-step process if, this could have been redone. This is a case where I guess they would have liked to go more,
Piece by piece.
piece by piece. So, so, they just wanted to let us know that,
But
they
what's
are
especially
on that.
relevant about Karen's point is they haven't forgotten about tree. They're not moving at the same pace that we are moving. And let's face it, there's, this is an urgent issue. And, so it's among our highest, if not the highest priority. But I know, yeah.
June, what I found frustrating is the opacity of the board. There's no sense of what their objections are, because it seems eminently logical to kind of follow through if you're a perfect logician and you care about your environment and your health and your community. Then it seems like a no-brainer, But so what are the objections, and how can we get to yes? Is that ever going to happen?
Yeah. I think we're doing it differently this year. So yeah, go ahead, Karen. We are. Go ahead. And we have to.
And I don't.
Agenda too. I have to say, because Karen has a hard stop at 7:30, and we need to get through a certain amount before we lose her. So. Yeah.
No, and then just also on the municipal curbside pickup of food scraps. They are aware. Village of Mamaroneck has gone ahead. The food scrap pickup is on the radar, but they also wanted to make clear that they first need to reach agreement on how to restructure the sanitation commission. As you know, that there's been a series of meetings on this every month now. There was a delay, it was a bit of a setback because of, there were 2 meetings that were delayed, but so they need to figure out how to restructure between the 2 municipalities, whether it's going to be an intermunicipal agreement or whether it's going to be an expanded district where the town of Mamaroneck takes the lead.
Yeah.
So they need to figure this model first, and then once they do that, they'll consider the services that come with it. And so, as Jane put it, they have to have all the ducks in a row before considering curbside pickup.
I have a question, which
let
is,
everybody know. I know we have to move on, but we will let everybody know what we learned. We don't have to have a collaborative meeting to share what we've learned.
Right.
So, we will keep everybody informed as we're informed.
so are they suggesting that any proposals we make be funneled exclusively through them, as opposed to addressing other other members of the board?
Beginning of a discussion. It's the beginning of a discussion.
And June, will you be meeting with the 2 of you meeting with Robin? That's the model in Larchmont. That's the model I know the best, which is that those meetings happened a lot with the liaison to the board,
Absolutely.
having a lot more access to the board and being able to kind of, intermediate and funnel things and say sort of yes here, but probably not there. Let's go here first. That can also be very effective.
Of course, yes.
With those regular meetings.
I wasn't at that first meeting, but I do intend to participate, and also be your eyes and ears and your voice.
Yes, thank you so much. We are counting.
Thank you.
I did want to also add the thing about going through Meredith. I think that's really a policy town-wide in terms of everyone is told, including board members, that they shouldn't be connecting with individual members of the staff. And if you have an issue, you should go to Meredith and she will talk to the person. So I don't actually think I don't know how you guys have been operating in the past, but I think that that's a general policy that applies to pretty much everyone. So I guess they would
We've
just
been a little different.
reinforcing that.
Thank you.
We've been a little different because the priorities of the collaborative have been so broad that they didn't all go, Steve was a great person in the middle. But if you had to deal with trees, you went to Liz. And if you had to deal with building department, you went to building department. It's
Different, that's all.
it was different because we dealt with the different departments.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah,
maybe
so we've got.
I'm new and I'm only here under Meredith, not Steve.
Right.
And I can tell you that's what I've been
But I
told.
think it's fine to go through Meredith if she has, she can make it easy for the questions to be answered, right, by the different departments. I will say that the maintenance department knew about what they did, and well, we'll see how it works. I mean, I think it's
Yes.
restructuring will be has to happen.
So we're gonna speak a little about the Climate Smart Community Certification now.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
So the good news that we have is that, Town of Mamaroneck has been recertified as a climate smart community at the bronze level. We found out on the 24th. This hasn't been, we can't make it public. We can't make a public announcement about it yet until the Department of Environmental Conservation of the state gives us the official go ahead. So they need to, make sure that that they're ready for that before we can make that official. But just to clarify that this certification is valid for 5 years. And thank you so much to Denise Dunn and Kat Warwick for the many, many hours that they put in preparing the submission, and of course to Sue as well. This was quite a feat. But as we all know, this is an ongoing process where we need to remain current. So actions and program requirements do change over time, because of the evolving field of in climate, right? Climate change and action. One of the takeaways is that we can't rest on our laurels. So even though this is valid for 5 years, things do expire, actions do expire. So we need to, from now on, also take that into consideration in terms of our practices. Like at events, we need to make sure that we are documenting things, we're taking photos that we can use as evidence for engagement, and that we store it in a place that is easily accessible, so that when we need to resubmit, we have the information, the photos, the evidence for our different events. So that's an important takeaway that we've had. And so we are going to be, and the important thing also to remember that this is, it's not just about points. This program, the Climate Smart Communities program, is really a roadmap. The state has provided a roadmap for municipalities on how to take climate action, right, in order to comply and achieve the goals of the state CLCPA, the climate law, and the Climate Act. So to the extent, so it would be to our benefit really to try to streamline and to align our climate response with that of the Climate Smart Communities program to the extent possible too. So we're going to consider how we can fully take advantage of our bronze level recertification as the next step. And we're going to be having discussions with the team that has been working on this to map out our how to respond to the reviewers' feedback, because there are also reviewers' feedback that we still need to respond to.
Shall we?
Any questions?
And we'll be keeping everybody informed and calling for feedback and recommendations on an ongoing basis, as Karen said. So this isn't a once and done situation at all. Michelle, you asked that question 2 meetings ago, I think. What happens, do things expire and then what? And yeah, we don't, just because we've earned points doesn't mean all of those points still go forward. It's a refresher.
What I asked for in that meeting and still would like to know is, it seems that you're missing a column to know how many points we have for each of those categories, because many of them have quite a range, 2 to 12 points, right?
Right.
5 to 20 points. And if we don't have any idea where we are, then it's hard to know where you have to go.
We do now. We do know now. So thankfully we do know now where we have the points. Where we have the 100. So we got 167 points out of the 130. We needed 120 points. We got 167 points. So we definitely met the minimum requirement. We went over that, and so we do know where we got points. Where we didn't get full points. So that's the next step, is to sort of to understand, we know why, and we know the details why we didn't get the points. So the question is now is in terms of trying to fulfill the full requirements. It's whether it makes sense to whether those are of priority to the town. So because there are a whole slew of different types of actions, and some may be more relevant to the town right now than others, right, in terms of trying to gain more points. But the good thing is that our bronze certification is for the next 5 years, is valid for the next 5 years. So now we have to choose what actions we want to take in terms of follow up, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
And as we discussed last time briefly, and we're going to go on our agenda, but this isn't just about winning points. It's how do we integrate this into the way that we prioritize our actions. So we're really looking at this kind of an operating system. It's not just a separate initiative where we're trying to get points, but it's really how do we think and breathe along these lines. Essentially, New York State is sort of giving us the answers to the test, but every community personalizes this and does it a little bit differently. It's not one boilerplate. We choose what suits us depending on how what our community looks like, and how and how that runs, and what our geography and our natural resources are like. So it's going to be a much more, again, iterative process. And we will also be looking in a more scrutinous way at what technical assistance and what grant opportunities are available to us. We don't just win, bronze status. We want to really dig into it and say, what more can we learn from this? What can we get from it?
Now, before we go, before Nicholas gives us our presentation, I just wanted to raise the point. One other thing that was mentioned at the our meeting with Jane and Meredith, and which has also been discussed at the town board, which is the comprehensive plan. So, I'm, I was appointed as one of the members of the steering committee for the comprehensive plan. And just to apologize in advance, I also have to leave at 7:30 because the first meeting of the comprehensive plan steering committee is today. It's, and it actually starts at 7 o'clock. But I told them that I'll be there half an hour later. But they're recording it so that it's really just an introduction, meet and greet kind of first meeting. But the important thing about the comprehensive plan and opportunity that we have is that, that Jane has made it very clear that outreach to the community is very important. It's a critical component of the comprehensive plan. The town board wants to hear from residents what is their vision for the future of our community, what is critical to them, and this will help the town board in planning policies. And this outreach and feedback that will be sought from residents is going to take place in spring. So there'll be probably different multiple channels for residents to participate and provide feedback on what is important for the future of our community. And this is the opportunity, this is the town board telling us they are going to be listening to residents during this time, and they really are seeking for feedback from all residents at this time. So I think this is exciting. This is an exciting opportunity, and just want to let you know.
How did they say how they're going to communicate meetings for the residents to offer feedback? Because spring is like next month.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's so that's what we're going to be discussing, I suppose, at the steering committee meeting.
Okay.
And so I'll be keeping you updated. But I imagine there'll be multiple ways. They'll be seeking feedback, probably survey, probably in-person meetings. There'll be multiple ways, because they understand that, that different residents are going to prefer different ways of communicating, right?
So they have a plan to communicate whatever their schedules are. Like if they're going to be sending out a questionnaire, they're going to let people know the questionnaire is going to be coming out. Or if they're going to hold in-person meetings, they're going to notify
That's right.
the town. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, they're going to have to do that because they really want to reach the different segments of the community.
Okay.
That's right. Okay, so do you want to June, you want to introduce Nicholas's presentation?
There's so much expertise among the group of us collaborative volunteers and members, and we really appreciate Nicholas's offer to say a few words. He, often when we talk about communications, we talk about promotion in terms of community engagement and education, but there's, we think about all of our stakeholders really when we think about communications. Nicholas has a great deal of experience, but he's about to share with us some of his experience in stakeholder management and communications in a way that is not about getting people to events per se, but to techniques and for approaches to share points of view that may start out on different sides of the table. So Nicholas, do you want to share your screen or okay? So yes. Thank you so much. I think we're going to all learn from this, and looking forward to hearing you share your experiences.
Great. Thanks so much there, June. And everyone, can you tell me that you can see my screen successfully?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right, excellent. So I'm going to go into presenter mode. So we'll take it to a full screen. All right, so yes, the reason for this particular presentation this evening is to kind of outline a little bit more about how to more effectively do environmental policy initiative communications to stakeholders who you'll be talking to. And of course, in our cases, mainly to the town stakeholders who we engage with on doing these particular initiatives in this case. So this evening, what I'm going to go through are just some of the objectives, really, I think just as a reminder of what we do certainly as a collaborative. And then what I hope that you would want to get out of this presentation as I talk through some of these communications best practices and other sort of strategic best practices on how we effectively work with these particular stakeholders. And then I'm going to touch on a real world case study example of what I dealt with when I worked for the Connecticut Green Bank in this case, and an example of where maybe some of these particular best practices came into play to help me be successful in getting a project done. And into actually getting a town to go and look into going to the CPACE program more generally. All right, so in terms of the objectives, maybe just as a case of a reminder in this case about, who we are as a collaborative and what we do. So our main mission is to preserve and enhance the long-term viability of the town from both environmental and fiscal perspectives. And that's taken right from our website, by the way. That is right in there in terms of what our mission is. And so in my opinion, the way to achieve this for the town, we have to then be able to implement key initiatives that key stakeholders in the town are going to have to go and opine on. So that includes the town board members and as well as town staffers who may have to help us with implementing these particular solutions. And then you'll have to agree with them in helping to basically meet those goals. So the objectives for this discussion is to equip you with the following kinds of information to get the optimal results for implementing these environmental policy initiatives. And some of these can be including, but not are necessarily limited to, how we message these policies, our speaking tone and our demeanor, our stakeholder engagement strategies, and negotiation and values identification. And basically, I just want to say that this is not necessarily a silver bullet. These different types of ideas and concepts I'm discussing with you, and they're not going to work necessarily in all cases. And what you will then be able to do is just get some sense of ideas of what you can use in order to go and put these particular initiatives before these town stakeholders that we're working with. Mm-hmm. All right, so let me start off first with this whole concept of these best practices for communications in this case, right? So I have a firm belief that we got to be just as focused on how we're pitching our ideas and our concepts as to then what we are pitching to them. So I know we're all subject matter experts on our particular different areas, and we certainly have to understand all the details that we're going to put before the town, especially when it's going to need higher up approval in this case. But we've also got to be aware of the audience who we're talking to and how we're messaging this to that same audience. And, we certainly have this public expectation that the town is always at our disposal, that they're always supposed to be here to listen to us because we're residents, but then we're also too active on this particular collaborative. So we expect them to have the time and the attention to give to our initiatives. But to expect them to digest really, these really kind of detailed proposals is really kind of a fool's proposition, I really regard. And then I say at the same time that the fact that we're going to think they're going to accept these same detailed proposals as we put them together and seek to get their approval, I also feel is kind of a bit of a fool's proposition. So basically what I'm just getting at in saying in all of that in this case, and just to give you the reality of it, is that these stakeholders are very busy. They have very little time and very little other additional attention they can give to these other particular initiatives because they've got many other responsibilities to take on, and this may not rise to that first level of priority for them. And so I think the simple goal to take from this is to say, we need to then simplify the message to them. We got to be then respectful to those very same stakeholders who have limited time. And then we had to outline clearly what those tangible benefits are to the town so that, again, we can capture their attention for the little amount of attention that they do have. And then we then can also then be able to bring them in so that then we can maybe make some immediate progress on getting these particular initiatives started in this case. So first, on simplifying the message. So again, instead of us going and giving them a already baked and ready-made proposal that we put a lot of time and effort into, which again, I don't begrudge, all the effort and the time that we put into these initiatives and developing them, because it is important that we're doing that. But the fact of the matter is that, again, we know they have limited time, and we got to be able to give them some of this information in these bite-sized chunks, as I think what June and certainly what Karen was already beginning to allude to this evening. And so one way, or certainly to simplify the message for them, is to come at it with them with just a basic, quick understanding of what our initiatives are by creating what I would say kind of like is a policy summary. This can be a bullet pointed and, in terms of giving the key takeaways to what the policy initiative is going to do, outline maybe some of the resources that are going to be needed that we think it's going to take to get this implemented, and then maybe what some immediate next steps could be for getting this particular initiative off the ground. And I would regard that this should be no more than a one-page, one-sided, basically a summary so that you can introduce the concept to them and that they have an understanding of what they're walking into. Because again, I want to just mention that, not to say that other issues in this case are not complex at the end of the day, but policy concepts in the environment is actually pretty complex nowadays. And so for these folks, they're not necessarily environmental practitioners at the end of the day. That's not their first sort of duty and their knowledge base. So instead, we got to break those ideas down into really small, bite-sized ideas that they can immediately grasp and understand. And I kind of really just kind of boil it down to saying that it's like you're explaining it to a 5-year-old. How would you do so if you were trying to tell a 5-year-old about a more complex environmental initiative you want to go put forward? That's maybe how you have to approach it for town stakeholders who have little time and then certainly little background on understanding environmental policies. So I'm just going to take a quick break actually from this presentation, and I actually am going to pull up in this case and go into talking more about this one-pager concept that I have already developed, and actually that I'd also gotten a lot of feedback and input from the resilience team that I'm on. So I thank them for all of their feedback that they've put into this. And so this is an example of one that I've developed for basically me trying to get the town to opt into the New York State CPACE program in this case. So the way that I've designed my particular one-pager might look different than maybe what other initiatives first page, one-page summaries might look like as well. So in my case, this is already a ready-made initiative. So I know I have some background and some information that I can already give to the stakeholders to be able to start to digest. So I would create this very basic summary in this case, just outlining what is the initiative, who benefits from it, and then maybe where is it already existing in this case where it's already been opted in. And so I've already, for example, in this, I've told them that there's been other Sound Shore communities here in Westchester, like New Rochelle, Harrison, and Rye, who have in fact opted into this program already, so that our next door neighbors have actually taken advantage of wanting to opt in and then make use of this particular initiative. Then because also it's a ready-made initiative, so there's already program parameters that I can be able to explain to them just to give them the basics so that they can understand again, who's eligible for this particular initiative, what are kinds of improvements people can get, what are maybe some of the different standards in this case that you have to meet to get these energy efficiency projects done and be financed through this program, and then what really are the town's responsibilities and resources that are necessary to bring to bear to help with the local administration of these programs. And so I just lay that out, in this case, in a very nice and neat table like this, so that they can just easily then read that and understand what exactly it is that this program is all about. And then in my case, this program underwent changes from the last time that this program was considered by the town, because it was considered by the town before. And then I made sure now to update them on where basically the program is today and what are the kinds of things in this case that that has actually changed about it that actually can make the town consider now maybe to opt into this program and to be more advantageous for them to consider doing it. And then, as I mentioned, you go into then outlining particular program benefits then to the town stakeholders so they can understand and visualize in their mind what is it in this case that they can benefit from in terms of, from doing these projects, the very end users in this case of getting those improvements, and then even to the residents. How can the residents potentially benefit, even though this might not be a program that they can directly use and benefit from in order to do energy saving improvements to their homes? But then I lay them out very, concretely bullet point by bullet point, what it is that they do in this case. And so this is what I really kind of just, wanted to put together as kind of a first kind of, look at maybe what one of these particular one-pager summaries look like in this case. And again, I just want to mention that you don't have to necessarily do the same exact format and layout of what I'm using for a one-page layout for this particular kind of, basic summary that you can provide to stakeholders, because all our initiatives are different. But I actually would like, though, that if you maybe take and model your particular initiatives, one-page summaries after this, that would be great, because I think, there are maybe different ways, again, you can structure it. There might be slightly different sections maybe to how you're going to lay yours out. But again, I think this neatly kind of summarizes what an initiative can be. So at least it's not overwhelming the stakeholders, and that they're just getting a taste for what it is this particular initiative is. So it doesn't look quite as daunting to them as they're going to consider trying maybe to implement the improvement here in the town locally. So,
So Nicholas, just so because we are going to hit some time frame issues here, do you want to go forward with your presentation, or do you want to just comment? Are you still going to use the rest of the slides?
yes, I'm going to go back to the slides right now.
Okay,
So,
we have just a few more minutes left.
okay, so yeah, I'm just going to go and run through this very quickly. So then the other sort of aspect to helping with, doing your messaging and simplifying it is to basically go and say you're going to illustrate your initiative through a case study. So if you can show that this is a successful initiative that's been implemented in another area, I think then you can make a case then to people that this is going to be something then that could possibly be implemented here because it's shown a proof of concept that has actually worked and that you can basically go and get that then implemented in this community. All right, so in terms then of talking next about, how we are addressing basically town stakeholders in this case. So I think we have to be respectful to these stakeholders. They're all in thankless positions. I would know, I once worked in government for 12 years and I got very little thanks for the work that I did. So the bottom line is that, they chose this work but yet they get little appreciation for doing it. And so while we're passionate about what work we're doing, and we want the town to also work with us to get these initiatives implemented, we still got to be respectful of their time and also their attention. So my tips just, to consider is, we use soft language when we're speaking to those stakeholders. So, when we're addressing them in this case, we don't, say, kind of really derogatory things like you or your department, like accusing people of things. You address them as like the town in this case, right? Make it kind of more broad in general so that you're not looking like you're signaling out people in this case who you're talking to. You should use a polite and soft tone. I mean, that should go without saying that, we're trying to be, polite and respectful again. And again, we avoid using, raised language and, raised voices and being being confrontational in this case. And then lastly, when we're going to obviously start to introduce these ideas to the stakeholders, we want to leave, reasonable intervals of time between our first and then follow-up encounters with them. So, and again, this is something that's going to vary, again, by initiative to initiative. And we want to be sure, of course, that, we don't leave them, too much time to go and not, then respond back to us. So again, we have to use our best judgment to think about how much time we leave them. And again, it's going to be dependent, I think, on what kind of initiative that we're coming to them about. And then, so as I was kind of doing through the one-pager introduction there, so I outline, again, what benefits that there are potentially to, the town and other sort of end users. And so we all know that our initiatives have these tangible benefits, but we got to learn to break them down in ways that people and the stakeholders who we're going to be talking to can understand. So I use like some of the benefits that we could always tout are, we're lowering greenhouse gas emissions potentially, we can lower costs to the town potentially, and then other stakeholders too within the town. We're reducing that risk of quality of life to the community, and you can go into more specifics about what that could be. And then you have the potential of raising property values and then retaining homeowners and businesses in the community in this case, because again, we're doing things in this case to try and make it look more attractive to keep these kinds of stakeholders in the town here so that we're continuing to make a really good quality of life community to live in. And again, our key is always to make this as positive and uplifting as possible about what the outlook is. We don't have to go with the dour or the down look, perspective into this. Let's give them something to be hopeful for. And why, in this case, that this is an initiative that we think should be done in this case to go and make the community more sustainable. All right, so now let me go and talk a little bit about strategy on how you maybe would get environmental policies implemented. So we always have to then be careful about how we approach our stakeholders who we're working with. And so I'm just going to go into a couple of different basics about stakeholder engagement, because we're dealing in this case with, again, complex environmental issues, and we always don't know that we're going to get the kind of response that we want in this case to the kinds of initiatives that we're developing. And so because we know then in this case, when we're dealing with then stakeholders, I want to just kind of break down who are the common ones we might identify who we're working with. That could be people like champions who know we're going to aid and help us in getting an initiative launched. We got some dissenters who maybe are not as willing to support our initiative, and then maybe even trying to stall what we're trying to do. And then we have the undecideds, the people who are not committed, and we still need to find out if we can get their support and then get them to yes. Because our jobs then are to identify who those champions could be, who can help aid us in making our case. And then for these dissenters and these undecideds, we know these are the people we got to work on to potentially get them to support our efforts in this case. Because again, it's not always a given we're going to get the people who are dissenters and those who are undecided. It's never always a guarantee. So how do I feel like we can get to yes with a potential dissenter at the end of it? Well, I regard it's more of an art rather than a science. And so to me, the one way that I think that we get a dissenter interested maybe to want to then work with us is that we make them part of the process. We seek them out. We actually want to involve them in the process because then they'll feel empowered and invested in wanting to maybe get that initiative done because they can take some ownership now in saying they had some responsibility to help us with the crafting of a particular initiative. And then we also listen to any of the concerns that they'll have because we know that, they may not have, all the interest in wanting to do an initiative, and they may have certain concerns about operationalizing these initiatives. And so let's hear what those concerns could be. And then we can show them that care and compassion to show that, we care about where they're coming from and that we're trying to find them a way to get to a compromise position to get a particular initiative implemented.
Nicholas, I'm sorry to interrupt. We only have a few more minutes left, and I know you have a case study, so you might want to summarize here.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, probably this presentation will be sent around to everybody at the conclusion of the meeting, so you'll be able to see all this information for your digestion soon. So yes, let me go into then talking about the case study real quick. So I did have an experience with a town when I was working for the Connecticut Green Bank and trying to get them into the CPACE program there. But not all the stakeholders who were in that town were wanting to be basically involved with the program, both from an administration standpoint and even some of the people who are going to be deciding the fate of the program on the town board. And so I identified champions to be the environmental committee in that town, as well as the town's mayor, which I think are our key sort of champions that I could really use to get these people involved to help me get the program opted in. And then basically the dissenters were the tax collector, who was concerned about increased workload. They objected to having the town's resources being involved for doing billings and collections for CPACE obligations and so forth. And then there was one board member in this case who acknowledged they were once formerly of the oil and gas industry. So I already knew I had somebody who maybe was really not going to be interested in a program that was going to be making energy efficiency improvements to their building. So I was already notified that well in advance. And then lastly, there was one undecided member who really didn't have any kind of strong position in one way or the other with regard to the program. So now my strategy I knew I had to go and do was to basically make the tax collector be a little bit more favorable to the program. And so that it involved me reaching out to that tax collector. I then basically also employed the help of the environmental committee to work on getting the support of the tax collector. Because the idea here would have been that I'm trying to get the tax collector to not then show that they're opposed to the program, that then could give possibly that undecided vote a reason to then vote against it as well, that I'm taking a potential issue out of the picture to improve my chances to get this particular initiative implemented. And then when I spoke though to this stakeholder, I spoke to them simply about what it was in terms of the program, how much of their duties and responsibilities were going to be part of this, doing the administration of the program. I then certainly listened to what their concerns were about taking on this responsibility. And then I felt like I allayed those concerns by telling them how much workload they were going to have, and that the fact that the town was offsetting, the town's costs were going to be offset by the Green Bank for helping to do the collections and billings each and every year. So those are all things that I helped to then get the tax collector more on board. But then when working with the town board, so I knew I had to, that I had to convince basically the undecided vote to opt in. But then I knew probably that because of the viewpoints of board member number one, I probably was not going to get them on board. But then my goal was to then prevent that particular board member from then convincing, say, board member number one to vote against the program as well. And so when I then was speaking at a town meeting about this, I spoke simply as well about the program, on how it worked, and then how the mechanics of this program was all evolving in this case. And then I was certainly aware that, they weren't going to get, the board member number one, as I mentioned, on board with that. So I came prepared to answer any sort of difficult questions they were going to throw at me to try and again sow doubt in the program, which was their goal. And then I identified and I was sharing the deep-seated values of board member number one, who I mentioned was part of the oil and gas industry. I brought that up publicly so that everybody knew about it in this case and why maybe they might be opposed, because really show where this was all coming from at the end of the day. And then I discussed those benefits of the program to really tout then also the success of its implementation across the entire state to really, again, build a more effective case for getting, especially board number four, to go and vote in favor of the program. So again,
Nicholas, I'm sorry, we have to wrap up because Karen has to leave. So I'm thinking that maybe what we do is we'll share your presentation with everybody, and you might want to add a couple of thoughts as a cover note of just bullet out, dealing with the dissenter or turning a concern into a feeling of confidence. And so we can then add your overarching comments to the presentation we send out. But Karen has to leave in a few minutes and she has a bit more. So do you want to wrap it up with any other final thoughts?
What I will just simply say to wrap up is that I was successful with my basically efforts in this case. This was a successful way for me to get this town to opt in. I did get a majority then of the board to vote in support of opting into the CPACE program. So again, I just mentioned this as one good example where these kinds of strategies worked, and that I was able then to convince the town board to go and opt in. So that's the good news on basically why I shared then these kinds of strategies with you folks. So again, I'll just mention that, again, it's not a silver bullet necessarily all the time. This is not always going to work in every situation, but know that there are tools at your disposal and strategies you can use that will really maybe help to make the case better, in this case, to basically those town stakeholders you're going to be dealing with on initiatives going forward. So I think that's what much I wanted to present today.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Nicholas. Very helpful. We would just like to also now talk about upcoming events that are planned for the spring, and would like to touch really on the farmers market, the plan for the farmers market, which we have been doing year after year as our one of our main channels for outreach on our sustainability initiatives. I'm glad to say that we are assembling a team. We've got a core team, and we have some proposed dates that I would like to get your thoughts on. We want to make it manageable for the team. So we are proposing that we hold the farmers market, have a table there once a month starting in mid-May. So we've chosen dates that would not conflict with other sort of long weekend celebrations like Mother's Day or Father's Day. So we're trying to avoid holidays. So the dates that we are proposing are May 14th. So this is a Saturday, it's always a Saturday. And we'll probably keep the same time from about 8:15 to 11:30, so that it's so that there are 2 time shifts for volunteers. But we are looking at May 14th, June 11th, July 9th, and September 10th right now. So that the idea would be to have August off, because a lot of people are away then. It seems to be a difficult time.
Yeah.
So those are the proposed dates, and just wondering whether there are any thoughts about that.
Everybody seems to want to continue our presence at the farmers market. And it's, so once a month seems reasonable and manageable. What about organizing?
And
Do you want to be talking about organizing it at all, or is that for the next meeting?
yeah, well,
I'm sorry.
we're still looking for a volunteer recruitment. We are still looking for help in volunteer recruitment. So we've got help in terms of on-site coordination, and also in terms of the setup, the breakdown of our tent, and supporting the volunteers. And we are also we've got somebody who is going to be doing the liaison work with the down-to-earth market staff. But we're looking for help in terms of volunteer recruitment. And it's really just once a month right now, starting in May. And so I hope that somebody will volunteer to do this. Please do contact me if you're interested. This is something that we've done before, so it's.
I do have one suggestion. It probably, and I don't know if it's a different conversation, we probably could use more volunteers just in general. So it might be a good idea to kind of talk about how do we get more people in the tent, so to speak, not just for the farmers market, but just in general, because it does become, the few times that I've been at the farmers market, it does become, what my observation has been, it's kind of the same group of people. So I would love to, maybe pick like Sarah Cody's brain. How does she get, 75 people to do her, food pantry stuff? I mean, there's got to be something where we can generate more volunteers so that it's not onerous for just a set number of people doing it.
We actually are working on some outreach to go out during before the end of March. So this month, and we can do a call for volunteers as part of that. It's going to promote upcoming events, and we can actually do a call out for volunteers on that. It's a good suggestion.
I mean, we do, Judy, we do have a few hundred people on our Sign Up Genius, right? And normally, I mean, so we do have people who are willing normally to do 1.5 hours, who are willing to be there at hand. It's I think that but not on a weekly basis necessarily. It becomes more difficult, so that's why we're trying to make it more manageable.
Right.
But of course, it's the coordination, it's the volunteer recruitment that takes more time.
I'm sorry, can I ask what the volunteers do?
Yes.
You have a table where you give out literature and stuff. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, and because of our range of initiatives too, we need and because of the equipment that we have that's required to set up, we need several people, at least 3 people, and in each shift. And so normally we have 2 shifts, but we have, but the volunteer's job is really to do outreach and to explain the different initiatives. So we, might have one volunteer in charge of the Love Your Food scrap recycling, another one dealing with the healthy yards, pollinator pathways, and another one, focused on the community solar or grid rewards. If we, last year we were doing outreach to try to get residents to sign up for the grid rewards program that Sustainable Westchester offers. So it's talking to people, giving them materials, is having a presence there that to let people know about all the different initiatives that are going on, and also about our organizations. I mean, it's also a way to get new volunteers as well. So I think it's, I think having a presence there is, having a presence reminds our community about the different ways that they can get involved in their daily lives in sustainability.
It's also required for the CSC, isn't it? Don't we get points for that?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
it is. It's, yeah, definitely. It's very important. And so, I mean, it's not the only
PSC,
place, but
Climate Smart Communities, for people who aren't familiar with the
Right, yeah.
acronym. Right.
and of course, there are other community events where we also have a table, and that will be, you know, where there will be opportunities later in the spring. In the Earth Day celebration, you know, we partner with Larchmont Environmental Committee. They have a Earth Day celebration coming up on April 23rd on Saturday, where they at Constitution Park. They had that last year, and they indicated that they'll be having it again this year. So where they have tables so that people can find out about the different ways that they can get involved in their daily lives in sustainability. So, and the schools as well, I've been told, Murray School, Central School will be having their Earth Day celebrations on the day before Friday, April 22nd, 3 to 4 p.m. So we'll be looking also for, we're looking for a volunteer. They're very interested in getting high school volunteers as well. And I think it also would be helpful to have a collaborative adult volunteer at hand there to be of support to the students and to make sure the materials are there. And that we provide the backup and the support that they need there at the schools. So if anybody's interested also in being there in the schools to be of help at the schools, do let me know. That's April 22nd. And just to let you know, a few other things in terms of events, we have the local summit coming up on March 8th, next Tuesday, I believe, where on the sustainable landscaping, June is going to be presenting together with Lisa McDonald and Nancy Seligson. So do tune in to that. We have a free community class as well planned in partnership with the Larchmont Mamaroneck Center for Continuing Education. They're organizing a free community class, an online, a Zoom class on March 28th. And will be sent, and that is on, that's Healthy Yards. Right, do you want to speak more to that, June?
I think we'll just send the link out there. The
Yeah.
link live. The idea is that the Center for Continuing Education is offering these opportunities for free, no charge to attend, and lots of good practical information. And they're pledging their support for our community, be more aware about simple things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint and live a more sustainable life. Thanks, Karen. So I know that we didn't have a lot of time for as much Q&A as there might have been interest in today, but if you still have questions that weren't addressed, let Karen and me know, send us emails, we will get more information out. And thanks so much for your patience and also for your active contribution to getting us through phase 1 and phase 2 of the climate emergency declaration response. There were no wasted efforts. All of that information is going to be used. And thank you, Nicholas, for explaining that in your experience. Sometimes you go a little slower. You just focus on clarity and understanding the values or underlying modes or needs, motivations of the stakeholders, and addressing those in a positive way.
June and Karen, maybe you can put in a sentence, what is the next step? Where are you going with what's been created? What is the involvement that you're looking for from the people that are sitting right here tonight and wondering, well, what's going on?
So are you talking about, so are you referring to
you accumulated the second step, you're assimilating that. What are you going to do with it?
So there's two.
Are you waiting for more input?
No, there's no more information is needed. No more information is needed, Mark. We went
So
through
are you
exhaustive
going to the
information
town?
collection
Are you
process.
going, are you going to the administration and going to present something? Are you writing a memo? What's happening?
Yeah, we're
And what's
outlining
the
our,
schedule?
we're outlining our we're outlining our recommendations. And also there are still some questions that need to be answered, and we're consolidating those questions and organizing that. So when we go back through Robin and then to Jane and Meredith, we're organized with clear questions and thoughts about discussion on next steps.
Yeah, I
So-
suggest that you move forward, invite Meredith, invite Jane, have them come here, hear what you have to say, respond to your concerns and your questions. You know, bring them here.
And I think when we
Okay,
have
thank you,
them
Robin.
I think
join
they'll
us,
come.
Oh, thank you,
when
Robin.
they join us, I think we'll want to all talk a little bit about how to organize the agenda so that it's a meeting that's really, really interactive and really productive for them. Because we do get into the weeds a little bit, and we want to make sure that we're getting the most high impact discussion going.
So,
There are things that they don't necessarily need to hear or weigh in on. So we want to make sure we prioritize.
so,
Sorry, I have to go, but
Yeah,
guys can
thank
continue.
you.
Please, yeah, please continue to come, but I have to go, sorry.
so,
Thanks, bye.
bye-bye. So I'm not trying to pin you down. Would you say by our next meeting, June, that you'd have some direction? Are we in a hiatus for the next month? On the
Call it a
conference?
hiatus. You know, I wouldn't call it a hiatus. We are organizing our next steps in terms of follow-up to our recent meeting with Jane and Meredith. Part of that is organizing any additional information we need, and part of that is looking at the priorities and presenting discussion points for response.
Okay, so playing devil's advocate right in front of Robin, are you going to be sending that to us after you organize it and say, hey, what do you think? Or is it going straight in? In other words, I get the feeling from what I'm hearing tonight, I mean, we've been sitting here and we're really not saying anything with regard to involvement of the people that are sitting here.
Well, over the
Yeah,
past
I
few
fell
months,
asleep.
there's been a lot of involvement, Mark. There's been committee involvement in terms of
No,
identifying.
I understand what's happened before, but what's happening from this date until our next meeting?
Right, instead of writing a draft report, we're organizing our thoughts and questions and working first through Robin. Will then go to Jane and Meredith and start getting their feedback.
Okay, that's fine. That's what
We're sort of organizing this information right now. And the next step is going to be a discussion or meeting with Jane and Meredith after we've had some time to get Robin to see what our plan is. There's been a lot of information coming in that we're filtering and we're organizing. You know, we can't sit in front of Meredith and ask, 19 questions that all start with, is the town aware? Is the town aware? Is the town aware? We're trying to organize this into communications that, a projected dialogue isn't a yes and no question.
So can I make a suggestion or a piece
Great,
that I
that'd be
don't,
great. Yeah.
that I don't fully understand, but understand the pressure of at the end of the last year, which was the tree issue, what to do about a moratorium on clear cutting trees, what to do with public review if people are going to cut down their trees, that they let their neighbors know, what we're going to do about building the canopy, which is important. The most important thing, I think, was whether the town board would place a moratorium on the clear cutting of the trees until they had time to look at it. And that decision came down, I guess, in September. And nothing's happened. So while you're brewing on all these other topics, which there's a lot to brew on and to organize, is there a way that you could summarize what your meeting was with Janie and Meredith, and so that the group that's here, who's invested a lot of time and energy, can understand where we are, because there are
Absolutely.
people that they are holding back from petitioning the town in order to do something.
Right.
And that would come probably from the collaborative or not. I mean, I'm not a formal member of the tree committee, but I've been in enough meetings to know the passion that's behind that. And I think they were waiting for you, or everyone was waiting for you to go and review some of these topics with them and to see what the top three items are, so that we know what happened.
Yeah, well, I think we did meet with them. And as Karen said, Jane's focus was, where do we start? And what does the process look like? And that's a very different starting point than where we were last year. We know that it needs to be a dialogue. And we are working on organizing the questions and the information gathering that we're hoping to pursue, because we don't want to do the same thing over again and come back. But there is opportunity to ask more about when Jane said, there's progress being made on internally on the tree situation. We can ask more about that.
Right, because the question was, what Arlene found out when she went to see Liz was that Liz was working with the town's lawyer and making adjustments to the tree code. Now, no one said whether all of the suggestions that were made by the collaborative, were included in those things, what was included, what wasn't included.
Yeah.
In the meantime, there are plenty of people that are not part of the collaborative that are banging down their doors.
I know.
Saying, I'm holding myself back, waiting for.
Yeah, I think this is, I just want to say one thing on this. We're not taking a passive approach to this.
Well, I don't know what the approach is, but I don't understand what some of just the content of the conversation, the tone of the conversation, the bottom line is. I mean, and I'm entering this to help you out, because I don't know how to ask the questions, but it's the biggest piece that I saw with the most damage. I received some of those letters of people who have been really wounded and had their properties compromised because people have gone ahead and done things that is within the code.
Yep.
And the code needs to be changed, but we don't know if the lawyer's working on the code, what will happen. And so the biggest question is, what's Jane's take on this? She made no comment at all during the three
I don't think we can address what didn't happen last year, but we are committed to having a dialogue, and we really listened to what Jane was telling and asking of us. It's a dialogue.
In that discussion, just to ask Mark's question, is, do we take the next month and put together the 3,000 signatures that you need to have the board make a decision on the
I will say,
code, or
I will say this: if there are 3,000 signatures from residents, that's important. That's different than a collaborative effort. I mean, I think one of the things that Jane—
The collaborative has not put their name on any petition, short of
public opinion that counts.
Maybe a couple, but there is a lot of, and I share.
We're not suggesting any residents hold back from bringing their requirements and needs to the town board. Residents should go ahead. What the collaborative can do is different, but residents should express their needs
June, could we consider making the tree code one of our top priorities?
It is. I mean, personally, I don't want to speak for Karen because she had to leave, but
Right.
as far as I think most of us or many of us would agree, there is very little as urgent as the tree code, because as actions aren't taken or decisions aren't made, there's irreparable damage being done. You cannot make up for, I mean, we've talked about this many times, you know, a 50 or an 80-year-old tree gets cut down, it's irreparable damage.
But we don't have any idea how the town supervisor feels about the code or what's.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, we'll get back to you as soon as we hear more.
Can I bring up a new topic, or is that inappropriate based on what happened in
Depends
the
what it
last
is,
7
Mark.
days?
It depends.
It depends. It's called Con Edison. We've had multiple power failures up in this area of the town. They're currently got about 10 crews still working, Kevin, on Griffin Avenue. And this isn't the first time. We're one of the lowest priorities in the north end of the town on the reconnect when power goes out. This
Wow.
past weekend or the weekend before, we had I'm going to guess our 4th or 5th transformer blow up in this area. When I say the area, I don't know where they always blow. I was told Fenimore Road. It may have been on Griffin this time. But I think that reflecting back, Nancy, when Nancy was supervisor, they had meetings with Con Edison to elevate the resiliency of the town and not to be the last ones in a major storm. This is happening because the equipment is old. There are poles that are leaning. There are some on Fenimore Road where we still have wires that Mitch and I identified for the town.
Okay.
We need to step forward as town. These aren't our priority for my house, but it's the entire neighborhood.
Okay.
When the power goes out, what's the next thing that goes on is all the generators and the noise, just like after Isaiah. So we lived with about 3 to 4 hours of generator noise on the nicest day of the whole winter.
All right, so that'll be noted. So if you can make a note of that, public channels.
Right, that's a perfect issue to bring to Meredith's attention.
Well, I'm bringing it up here because I don't know what's going on in the rest of the town. How many of you have had power failures this year?
Okay.
Anyone?
Yes, we have.
Well, last year, 2021, not 2022.
No, 2022.
No, not yet.
You're lucky.
But I
Okay,
saw,
thank you, Jim.
I saw those, you say there's more trucks than I saw. I saw 5 trucks the other day when I was at your
They're
house.
still, they're lining, they had 1 lane traffic
So
today.
your question, if you know, how you're summarizing your question as,
A town liaison with Con Ed to, I'd say, check transformer. Why are we having so many transformers go? I'm not an electrical engineer.
yep, got it. Thanks.
Okay, I know squirrels can do it. I know birds can do it, but I think it would be random across the town.
Got it. Thank you for raising that.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. So thank you, everybody. We will get back to questions as we have information to share with Robin and from Jane and Meredith, and you will hear. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Kevin,
Thank
thank you. Kevin, thanks very much for the fish. Okay, everybody.
Yes, thanks for the fish, Kevin.
Kevin, I want some fish.
You have to get early to the fish market. It was fresh Norwegian, fresh caught Norwegian salmon.
Where do you go?
The market, the fishmonger. They have.
Latchmont.
Okay,
night,
listen,
everyone.
thank you all.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
You're in
Thank
the
you,
meeting.
everybody.
Take care. Have a good weekend and we'll see you soon.
Okay, good night.
Good night.